Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics podcast. It's another Prime Minister's Question Time special. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. And if anyone's getting a sense of deja vu and feeling like we've done this before already today, yeah, we have. We tried going live earlier and it didn't work. So should we get straight to it?
Well, in a sense of deja vu, let's listen to Sir Kay and Kemi lock horns again.
Okay. Count how many questions get answered.
The Prime Minister tried to avoid scrutiny on the releasing documents immediately after Prime Minister President's last week. So let me ask him now. Did the Prime Minister...
Okay, I don't know what it is that is causing that. It's obviously some sort of system issue. My end. Right, one second.
appointing him as our ambassador to Washington.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me start where I must. This was my mistake in making the appointment, and I've apologised to the victims of Epstein. I do so again. The government is complying with the humble address in full, but we are also continuing to support the police in their investigation. The matter of process was looked at by the independent advisor on ministerial standards. It's clear the appointment process wasn't strong enough, and that's why I've already strengthened it. But it was my mistake, Mr. Speaker, and I've apologised for it. She should follow suit and apologise for a gross error of judgment in calling for the UK to join the war in Iran without thinking through the consequences.
Mr. Speaker, I know he doesn't want to talk about the documents he tried to bury last week. He's going to try and talk about anything else, but he's not going to get away with it. I asked him a question he did not answer. We know the Prime Minister was warned about the risk of appointing Peter Mandelson. This is not about the process. He knew that Mandelson stayed in Epstein's house after Epstein had been convicted for child prostitution. He knew that, so I will ask him again. Did he speak to Peter Mandelson about this before the appointment, yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've already made clear that he was asked questions and gave untruthful replies. The government is complying with the humble address. The process has been set out. The independent advisor has looked at it, and he said, quote, the relevant process for a political appointee was followed. Now, obviously, this is a question of my judgment, but what about her judgment? She wanted to rush into a war with Iran without thinking it through. At the weekend, Mr. Speaker, three weeks in, she said, oh, there isn't a clear plan behind the US strikes in Iran. That's the question she should have asked at the start. The decision to commit the UK to a war is the biggest decision a Prime Minister can take, and she got it completely wrong.
I didn't hear an answer, Mr. Speaker, and he's right, it is about his judgment. He has repeatedly told us that Peter Mandelson lied to him, but he won't tell us if he actually picked up the phone and spoke to Mandelson before appointing him. This doesn't make any sense. The Prime Minister told us on the record, and I quote, I believed the lies he told me. If the Prime Minister didn't speak to him, how can he say he lied to him?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the process is clear. It's been looked at by the independent advisor. And she asked me about the process and judgment on appointments. She appointed the Shadow Justice Secretary. He said last night that Muslims praying in public, including the Mayor of London, practicing his faith, are not welcome. He described it as an act of domination, straight from the Islamist playbook. If we're in my team, he'd be gone. It's utterly appalling. She should denounce his comments and she should sack him.
He wants to talk about justice secretaries. His justice secretary is abolishing jury trials. My shadow justice secretary is defending British values. I know who I would rather have sitting on the front bench next to me, and it's not him.
Prime Minister.
But Mr. Speaker, this is important. He does want to talk about anything else except what I'm asking him. 3 times I have asked him if the Prime Minister spoke to Peter Mandelson. 3 times he has refused to answer. We can only assume he did not speak to Peter Mandelson. From the documents published, we know he left the questioning of Mandelson's relationship with a convicted paedophile to 2 of Mandelson's closest friends, one of whom was also friends with a convicted paedophile. Asking those questions should have been his job. Why did he fail to do his duty?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, so her position is that the Shadow Justice Secretary is defending British values when it says Muslims praying together in Trafalgar Square are not welcome. Mr. Speaker, even Tommy Robinson, I can hardly believe I'm saying this, has said today that if the Shadow Justice Secretary had made these hateful comments 2 years ago, the Conservative Party would have kicked him out. Now, Tommy Robinson isn't some sort of moral signpost. He was pointing out how much their party has changed. They're more inclined to his views, and he's right about that. The fact that he's sitting on her front bench shows she's too weak and has got absolutely no judgment.
I'm going to pause there for a second. So, we went through quite a lot.
Well, a bit of deja vu, wasn't it? We talk sometimes about whataboutery, and I think Sir Kay then used what about her judgment in calling for the UK to go to war, which was his kind of attack line last week. The Mandelson thing it feels a little bit pedantic, doesn't it? This one. Did you speak with him?
I just feel, how much can you flog it for until you get a conclusion to the police investigation, until all of the materials are released, which won't be until after the police investigation is concluded. So it's
and for me, it is a process question, isn't it? It's that piece of, and I guess the bit none of us understand is again, without rehashing the whole Mandelson thing, what's he known as, the Prince of Darkness or the Creature of the Night, or it's not like it was new news. So there is there are the questions remain over how he was appointed, but I'm not sure we're squeezing any more out of that.
There's no fresh
now.
insight coming out, is
No,
there?
no. And similarly to she would have taken us to war. It's like, yeah, you did all that last week. So that was all a lot of old nonsense. And so we move into a new, not Prime Minister's questions, but Prime Minister's, what shall I put it, changing the agenda onto whatever the Shadow Justice Secretary said. And again, because I've not seen it verbatim, I'm not quite sure what he said.
No, it's it's just, again, a kind of, these aren't the questions being asked, and instead the response is, but you did this, and we get that you don't like each other and that you disagree with each other, but it's not kind of going anywhere, is it? Let's play on. He says,
about my leadership, I'm shocked because his former deputy has just fired the starting gun on the race to replace him. And I'll tell him one thing, she and I both agree that this weak man should be replaced by a strong woman. But I'm not finished, Mr. Speaker. I have too much to say to him. There is still a lot to ask. There is still a lot to ask about the Mandelson files. There's still a lot to ask. The Prime Minister knew that Mandelson had kept up a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. The documents released also show he'd been warned about appointing Mandelson. He claims he was lied to. Mandelson had twice been fired for dishonesty. So why did the Prime Minister believe Peter Mandelson over the vetting documents?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she asked about leadership. When I see religious events in Trafalgar Square, when I see Hindus celebrating Diwali, when I see Jews celebrating Hanukkah live, when I see Christians performing the Passion of Christ, or Muslims praying, that shows the great strength of our diverse city and country. I've never heard her party call out anything other than the Muslim events. It's only when Muslims are praying. The only conclusion is the Tory party has got a problem with Muslims.
Can I just say, people say, I am not responsible for the answers. I've just got to say that. Come here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a shame he's not responsible for the answers either. The Prime Minister wants us to believe that he is a serious leader, but he doesn't do the work. He outsources the decisions, and when things go wrong, he blames the vetting, he blames the Chief of Staff, he blames the Cabinet Secretary, he blames anyone but himself. This Prime Minister appointed Peter Mandelson, but didn't bother to ask the questions. If he cannot be straight with the House on something as simple as this, why should we believe a word he says about anything?
She talks about doesn't do it. 3 weeks ago, she said we should rush into war. She didn't do the work. She didn't think through the consequences. Committing our military to a war without thinking through the consequences is the gravest mistake a leader of the opposition can ever do. And she comes back a week later and says, oops, I got that one wrong. She's utterly irrelevant and she's got no judgment. This is the leader of the opposition who said I should have empty chaired the most important NATO summit in years. This is the leader of the opposition who said Greenland is a second order issue. And this is the leader of the opposition who jumped into a war with Iran without stopping to think. On top of that this week, the failure to condemn and sack.
Order. And I will repeat again, I'm not responsible for the answers, but it's certainly not opposition questions.
Mr. Speaker, add to that the failure to condemn and sack the Shadow Justice Secretary for the poison and division that he spreads. It's turning out to be quite a month for the leader of the opposition who claims she never makes any mistakes.
Yes, Lindsay Hoyle, again, not really having any patience with the concept of it's Prime Minister's questions.
Yeah, but we've seen a pattern over the last few, haven't we? It is just, if this is meant to be the Prime Minister answering questions, then the Speaker of the House has to have more teeth. Would you like a cup of tea, Simon? I want to draw your attention to the fact that Kimi Badenoch wants to start a war. Well, you're just reading a pre-prepared statement. You're not answering the question. So I think there is limited value in that. Interesting little point there about Angela Rayner. Obviously, she had a meeting with a left-leaning Labour group last night and said, perhaps it's time for Labour to return to the Labour values of not paying tax on your third home. No, I don't think that was the point you made. But clearly setting out her stall very early for a comeback there.
Okay, let's play on. I don't think there's that much more of Badenoch.
Oh, there can't be. We need something fresh to this one.
Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I join the Prime Minister in offering my condolences to the family and friends of the two young people who've been killed by the meningitis bug in Kent and all those affected by this horrifying outbreak. Mr. Speaker, Britain's independent nuclear deterrent is critical for the defence of our nation and for the whole of Europe. But the current Trident missiles will reach the end of their lives in the 2040s, so we have to make a choice now. Lease new missiles to the United States, accepting whatever terms the President gives us, or build our own here in the United Kingdom. And the Conservatives and Reform say we have to rely on President Trump and the United States because we couldn't possibly do it ourselves. Does the Prime Minister agree with them?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our independent nuclear deterrent protects us every day, and we should never forget how important it is. And it is important that we renew it. We will do that in the best interests of Britain. I mean, he's openly advocating a plan which he doesn't know how much it would cost and how it would work. That isn't the way to deal with our independent nuclear deterrent.
Sir Ed Davey.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised at that response. The French can do it. Does the Prime Minister really think Britain can't? But moving on, Mr. Speaker, a New World investigation into GB News has found hundreds of shocking breaches of the rules of impartiality and accuracy. Yet Ofcom has repeatedly refused to take action. Andrew Neil says, just as Fox basically became the channel of Donald Trump, it is clear they have turned GB News into the reform channel. Mr. Speaker, we cannot let GB News propaganda turn our great country into their version of Trump's America. Either the government rules aren't fit for purpose, or Ofcom isn't properly enforcing them. Prime Minister, which is it?
Prime Minister.
Well, he's right to raise an important question of free speech and our media. It is a matter for Ofcom, and it's important that we let them deal with it.
Nigel Farage.
So before we
Before we launch into Nigel Farage, brackets sponsored by GB News, possibly not. That's a matter for Ofcom, not for us. The nuclear deterrent. Would it be better if Britain built its own missiles? Yeah, I think so. But I guess there's an element of, I don't know whether any lads or lasses have got some plans for nuclear missiles in a filing cabinet anywhere. They strike me they're not going to be the kind of things you can just knock up with a set of plans that you download from the internet. And I get
or if you try to, you should expect someone knocking your door.
You would expect
So
to knock at the door.
Don't do that.
But there is an element of, and look, you could never guarantee anything with Donald Trump. The bogeyman of Donald Trump is like, he's halfway through his second term. Okay, he might change the rules and have a third, but he's getting near the end of his shelf life. 2040 is a long way away. And will the US return to normal politics? And I'm putting that in air quotes. I don't know. But I'm not sure we can be making those really important and expensive strategic decisions because Donald Trump's a lunatic.
I guess the counter to that would be that's precisely the reason why you should, because we don't know. The future's unpredictable, and if we leave it to the 2040s, it will definitely be too late to come up with our own solution.
Yeah.
And if you're going to get cracking on it, you should at least get someone to be exploring it from a feasibility perspective now, rather than wait until 2040.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, if the French make them, I'm sure they'll cut us a good deal. It's not a bad idea, but it does need the reasons for doing it aren't because of President Trump, are they? They're bigger and better than that. And I thought the second question was a bit of an odd one, because do we think that anybody who watches GB News believes it's an impartial news source?
I gather you could. I mean, I guess you could. You could probably. I mean, we don't have a sample of GB News audience members, and I don't know how much of an overlay there was between our audience and theirs, but I suspect that a certain proportion of their audience would consider them to be the only factual news, and that all the other ones are biased. So,
I think, yeah,
there's a point, but there's also a point of either the regulator doesn't have the right operating parameters, or it doesn't have enough teeth to basically do what it needs to do. But if you either have standards of truth and factuality regarding and impartiality regarding news, or you don't.
Yeah, and I guess I might be biased towards GB News because I've been on there twice.
Yeah, but you're not. They're not shoving money in your direction in order to do that. I guess I
No,
just find it strange
unfortunately
that
not.
there's. I guess the point that's trying to be made is that on one hand, the BBC can't seem to do anything but trip over its own shoelaces in its desperate attempts to try to be balanced by producing completely impossible, impossible kind of different points of view, but at the same time letting stupid things slip that basically shouldn't be kind of broadcast and scoring massive own goals. So on that, we seem to have a different standard that we apply to them, which some may possibly argue is justified because of how the license fee works. But who knows? That's a different episode. Let's should we listen to what
Let's
the
see
right
what
honourable gentleman from
the
Clacton
member from
has...
somewhere near Clacton.
Yeah, Mar-a-Lago.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the course of the last year, our North Sea neighbours, Norway, have opened 49 drill sites for gas and oil. On our side of the North Sea, the number is 0. Given that our critical reserve of natural gas is down to 2 days and how vulnerable we are, and with talk potentially of energy rationing coming later this year, isn't it time we change course, got rid of excessive taxation on the exploration companies, opened up the licenses, became self-sufficient in natural gas, and with that would come thousands of jobs, increased tax revenues, and cheaper gas prices? Isn't it time we followed Norway?
Mr. Speaker, oil and gas will be part of the mix of our energy for many, many years to come, as I've set out many, many times. But he's now highlighting the consequences of the war that he said we should rush into. He wanted us to go to war. He said it was perfectly clear that we should support the strikes. Then, just like the leader of the opposition, a week later, he said, oh, no, I got that one wrong. You can't make mistakes about decisions as serious as committing to war. It's a gross error.
Okay, so a short one. The leader of Reform only getting one question.
Yeah, only getting one question, but an interesting and valid question, to be honest. Norway, and again, their setup is very different in that their oil and gas goes into their sovereign wealth fund, which means they have a jolly old socialist time of it. Question just completely ignored.
Yeah, again, a different topic that we won't opine on regarding kind of the point. But again, it's not... At what point do we stop calling it PMQs and just call it something else?
Well,
that's a pantomime.
And I think for me that it is a piece where I guess if we look at the wider issue, does this actually? This is kind of our showpiece window on UK politics, doesn't it?
Mm.
And I guess what we've actually seen today is almost no questions answered. Some of the questions were gotcha questions. I get that. But there's an element of sometimes when we look locally, we see these things as leaflet fodder, don't we?
Yeah.
Kind of the questions asked simply so that, and if I look at that last question, which for me, whilst I am no fan of Nigel Farage, as listeners to this podcast will know, it seemed like a perfectly valid and reasonable question that was worth an answer. And the answer of, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about because he would have rushed us into war. The same, scratch out Kemi's name, write his instead, for me was just a dereliction of the process from the Prime Minister. So I'm not sure we've gained too much from when the VT was playing at double speed with the jibbid in the background because
have we learned anything more from when we actually couldn't hear the video?
I'm not sure that we have on this one. So
no one made a point that we didn't think they were going to make, and no one got an answer to the point that they made.
Yeah, no, and I guess what you need is better political insight, and the best place to get that is from the Pompey Politics podcast. So come back next Sunday at 6:27 when Simon won't mess about with the start time, and we'll get the whole show in, and there'll be no technical issues, and it'll all be wonderful. But this evening, you've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Thank you. Join us on Sunday. Remember, the deadline to register to vote in May's local elections is 11:59 p.m. on Monday the 20th of April. Use the QR code on screen to take you to the Electoral Commission's website, where there are further details about registering to vote, as well as information where you can confirm where you would need to vote if you're voting in person on the day. Other deadlines apply to register for postal or proxy voting. Don't forget, if you're voting in person on May the 7th, you'll need to take photo ID to be able to vote. If you're not sure what photo ID counts, scan the QR code on screen or go to the Electoral Commission's website, where there are further details, including information about how to apply for a free voter authority certificate, which you will be able to use to vote in person on the day. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.